All right, guys, welcome back to the 10th episode of Virginia is for Conspiracy Lovers. We are back for part two with our good buddy Dan Duke, the great great grandson of Jesse James, the outlaw Jesse James. Super excited to have him back. We did 3 hours last time, 2 shows ago when you were on, and we got to 3 hours, and I was like, we haven't even touched on really the Templar stuff or much of the treasure, like the maps, the visuals, and stuff like that. And that's the part I really dig. But I'm finding more and more that when I do these interviews and stuff like that, I almost need a part two with everybody because I want to hear their explanation of the history, what I've already heard them say on a podcast somewhere. I want to hear it again, and that way everybody else gets the background too. But it's always the stuff at the end that like is the juicy part, and I hate it. All happens on every podcast where like you get all the background out of the way, and then they start getting into the juicy stuff, and it's like, oh, we're out of time, and I'm like, God, dang it. um
Yeah.
so we might be doing more of these part twos. But anyway, Daniel Duke, how's it going, man? Little less
Great.
caffeinated this time around. You feeling a little
Yeah.
bit better? Got some sleep?
Yeah. I got some sleep and I'm drinking coffee, but not nearly as much as I was last time. So,
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, dude. Our last episode with you was far and away the biggest episode that we did. I didn't do anything different to promote it or anything like that. I did just randomly by chance, kind of flipped by somebody talking about the death of Jesse James by the coward Bob that movie that we talked about the last time.
yeah.
Somebody had put up a post on some group on Facebook and was talking about how great it was and whatnot. And I I kind of like read him the I didn't read him the riot act, but I kind of was like, "Hey," and threw in some really juicy information that I've learned from you and was like, "If you want to, really hear about Jesse James, why don't you listen to his great great grandson? Here's his stuff, you know what I mean?" And I think we got pulled some listeners off of that. So, probably some folks out there waiting for part 2, man.
Cool.
All
That's
right.
good.
Well, I think we kind of like we said we kind of covered the background last time, and if again it's episode 8, there's not many of them to pick from, so you should be able to find it fairly easily. But we covered the background of who Jesse was, why he joined the Confederacy, where he was in the Confederacy, being it with Contral's Raiders as a guerrilla force, and then what he had to do when he got out of, once the war was over and all guerrillas were considered, enemies of the state and outlaws. He kind of never really had a chance after that. Became an outlaw, robbing banks, and then is supposedly killed by Bob Ford. And that's where we kind of jump into your story, where you and your mom had always been told that her great grandfather was Jesse James, and everybody just around town just kind of knew that was Jesse, and the family all knew the story, and all, um, in that small town, people knew. And
Yeah.
then you guys decided, okay, well, let's see if there's any legs to this later on, and really dug into it. And I think have proven beyond speculation that James L. Courtney, the man who lived to a ripe old age, who was your great grandfather, was the real Jesse James. What we haven't gotten into yet is really big is the really cryptic conspiracy codes, treasure, the Templars, treasure maps, and how you had to decode and figure that kind of stuff out. And so we brought you back on this time, and you're gonna share some images with us, and we're gonna see the stuff because it's absolutely incredible stuff. So, man, take it away. I'll still shut
Okay.
my dumb
Uh,
mouth now.
no, no. Trying to figure out where to. So starting off with the treasures and a little. I guess I got into some of that last time, but while yeah, I helped my sister and I would help our late mother with her research on Jesse, and on my free time when they had everything taken care of on their end, I would I would still I would keep looking at the treasure maps, the treasures, the legends of it, and it also like people like former Attorney General of the state of Texas Wagner Carr, who was part of the Warren Commission on JFK's assassination, and
Mm,
that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But he would contact my mother, call her, and talk about Jesse and the treasures, and he would always bring up he and a lot of other people. Anytime you talk about Jesse and treasures, the word the name Knights of the Golden Circle come into play, KGC for short. So
hmm
there's also a KGC treasure template that came. It ended up being leaked. The guy who made that most famous was Jesse James hoaxer by the name of J. Frank Dalton,
Okay.
and he's been debunked on his claims about Jesse James. But there was a lot of stuff he knew about the treasures that always it was much more than anybody else could have known. You had to have been on the inside to have known that stuff. But at the time,
Right.
I didn't know. I thought I don't know if this guy's legit on the treasures. I already know he was lying about being Jesse. So where does the lies stop? Where do the lies stop, and where does the truth start? And
Right.
or is there any truth to it at all? And then Wagner Carr would call, and Wagner Carr's son, according to Wagner Carr, his son was real big into treasure hunting as well, the KGC treasures. And his son was using back then, he called it satellite technology. I don't know if it was LIDAR. I don't think it was LIDAR. I don't know what he was using, but they were looking for treasures. Wagner Carr had his driver show us where three large caches were located. And I mentioned George Roming, who had helped Jesse bury the treasures. So
Right.
I had this KGC treasure template, and let me bring that up real quick while I'm talking. I'll try
Okay.
to let me see. So, give me 1 second.
Yep. You're good.
Hmm. Now I'm trying to
Yeah,
figure out. Let's see.
down at the bottom of your screen, green
Okay,
arrow.
yeah. There. 1 second. People are going to think I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, and I
I
really.
barely can myself.
So I need to open the. Okay, there. Let me see. There's that. 1 second.
Yeah, and I mean, when I first got in contact with you, I didn't know
There.
any of the treasure stuff. Or really didn't know much about Jesse at all, other than what everybody knows about him being an outlaw. And that's really why I picked up your book, because the first book of yours that I read was Jesse James and the Lost Templar Treasure, and I was like going on vacation to Hilton Head, and I was like, I need something to read on the beach. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, that's it. That's there's no other title in this bookstore right now that I'd rather read. So, all right. So this is the KGC template, which
Yeah. And that's what they get, that's what everybody had. They're like, there's a couple others out there that has a little turtle and some other designs down on the bottom right hand corner, almost like a map legend, but it doesn't tell you anything. There's a
really,
turtle, and a turtle is a treasure symbol. For
right,
those who don't know, a lot of treasure hunters, they say if you find a turtle head, a turtle shaped rock, it can either there's a lot of different things. Like if its head is pointing to the north, then head north. The treasure's just north of you. That kind
right.
of thing. But anyway, turtles and heart shaped rocks or
I was
heart
gonna
shaped
say,
symbols. Yeah.
yeah,
And
I've heard
that
the heart
ties.
shaped thing, especially involving KGC treasure finds.
Well, and if you find a heart with a split in it, that's
Mhm.
supposed to be a sign of a death trap. The treasure, but it's guarded by some sort of booby trap.
Wow.
It could have been like a deadfall, a boulder that'll crush you, things like that. They were also known to plant some said, I don't know how true
Explosives.
they would have explosives,
Yeah.
like an old Dutch oven full of black powder and nails, things like that. But I don't know how true that is, or I often wondered if that was treasure hunters trying to scare people away. So
Right.
you never know. But so that's what I had, the treasure template, and it doesn't have any scale, no dimensions, anything. So I was
Right.
trying to figure out, how does this work? And then when uh, Wagner Carr and George Roming told, Wagner had his driver show us where the treasure three were. George Roming drew us a map and told us exactly where a fourth one was. I made an overlay. I made a transparency out of that template and laid it over on Google Earth and just played with it, and everything matched up. It blew my mind. Once I got the scale, I was like, "Oh my god, this actually works." I didn't think it would work, and it
Yeah.
worked. And that blew my mind. I think the biggest problem with most people and any treasure hunter I'd ever met, most treasure hunters, by the way, remind me of land pirates. That I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't turn
Yeah.
my back on them if I found something. But
We've
anyway,
got we've got relic hunters around this area.
yeah,
Because we were a big we were underwater years ago, and the amount of crystals and old dinosaur, like mostly big shark's teeth and like prehistoric like sea life. You can you can dig them right out of the side of like the mud banks on the rivers, and that's dude. Don't ask one of these guys like I mean they start treating it like that and the like the Clovis points. I mean
oh
people
yeah, like
people
Indian mounds.
yeah people will kill you over those things, man. That's
Yeah, they get
crazy,
they
but
get they get wild. There's a lot of people out here who dig in Indian mounds, and
mm,
this part of Texas, Comanche, Lipan Apache, and a couple other tribes, Tonkawa, sometimes Karankawa, but not Karankawa were the cannibals. Anyway, a lot of
ah
those tribes crossed in this area, and it was big trading. They
yeah
traded, they killed each other, all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of mounds, and there's colorful people who get into that, and they if you get near one of their sites, they might shoot you.
oh
That kind
yeah
of back in the older days. Now it's a lot more civilized out here. Now that Austin's encompassing everything. So
yeah.
anyway, so,
We got off
so
on a
it's a
tangent.
whole different topic.
Yeah.
um, so I used that. I laid that over the map, and I'll pull up another image for you. I found when I laid that over Google Earth, I had 1 second. I don't there. When I laid that over Google Earth, I thought, okay, there's that one, and I got to working with it, and it was more like a grid pattern. And I'm looking for the grid pattern real quick so I can explain it right here. 1 second. I'll try to share that real quick. That's a rough view. It's not
Oh, there you go.
exact.
Oh, wow.
It's like a grid pattern that covers Texas. You can go as far as you want with it. I went into New Mexico. I went into a lot. I haven't covered the entire United States, but I've covered a large part of it. And what got me interested, there's areas of interest like the Kensington Runestone, the Newport Tower in Rhode Island,
Yeah.
Oak Island, like the part that goes out over here over by in New Mexico, the Los Lunas Decalog Stone, um, Victorio Peak, New Mexico. It lines up with areas that are known to have had treasures and also areas of historical mystery, like the Los Lunas Decalog Stone, for
Yeah.
example. It had Jewish writing carved into the stones, and it's a park. You can go out and look at it and see it. But the pioneers supposedly had asked the natives where that came from, who did it. And they said it was there when they got there. As long as they could remember, it was always there. And
Wow.
that opens up a whole nother can of worms. But there's a lot of areas of historical mystery and known treasure sites that lined up with. And I thought this is awesome. It's like a key to, if I think there's a treasure in the area, you look at that, and I give the directions in the book how to do it. I
Yeah.
used how to put the template together on Google Earth. Uh, I used public lands, national parks. It would have been easier to use private properties around me, but I didn't want to get
Yeah.
sued, for having a flood of people looking for treasure on everybody's property,
Right.
and that could also
Right.
get somebody shot real quick. So
Yeah.
yeah. So just be careful if you ever put it together and go looking. I always tell people, always get permission from the landowner. That's also one of the hardest things to do, because if you tell them you think there's treasure on on their property, the first thing they're going to think is, I want, it's my property, it's my treasure, and they want to
Right.
try to find out as much as they can without allowing you on there. And it's just
Yeah.
greed falls into place, and it just I I have yet to get permission on a large property where an area was that I thought had a large catch. I've yet to get permission. They'll give you permission and then change their mind overnight and not let you on their property. So I thought,
Yeah.
fine, good luck finding it on 1,000 acres. So,
Yeah. No kidding.
but anyway, it's anyway, back to the rest of it. So I put that together, it lined up, and I got to reading. I wanted to know the meaning behind the dimensions, the if there was any meaning, why it was that way. Uh, different numbers on the template, like, well, just the measurements, like the 161. If you take, what was it? It was 160 on the large template from one corner to the other. It's 161 miles. So I thought, why 161? Every measurement on there.
Yeah.
161 is the square of the precession of the equinoxes. 25,000. What is it? 765, something like that.
Yeah.
It's the square of the precession of the equinoxes, and that, I thought, okay, maybe that's right, maybe it's not. I kept looking, getting deeper into it. The deeper you get into it, the more Masons fall into play. Not just
Yeah.
Masons, Rosicrucians, Kabbalah. It ended up leading me back through different people like Sir Francis Bacon. And the way I
Right.
came across him was Marie Bauer Hall. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, I know that book. That's
Yeah.
all. That's part of my big part of my research.
Yeah. And then that was Foundations on Earth. And then there's another book, Quest for
Quest for
Brutal
the Bruton
Vault.
Vault. Yep.
Yeah. Um, and that ties in with Sir Francis Bacon. Marie Bauer Hall, for those who don't know, she was the wife of Manly Palmer Hall, who was one of the most famous 33rd degree Masons in the last 100 years, at least.
Wrote
Uh,
the Secret Teachings of All Ages.
yeah, and I've got
Um,
that right next to me.
yeah,
Uh,
that guy, um, I've heard him described by somebody as saying he was the most brilliant, most spiritual, and the biggest huckster ever. Not that he was just in that same vein of secret societies and masonry, in that he had all the knowledge in the world. What he put out in his, books and things like that was just enough. You know what I mean? And there was some
yeah,
misdirection in a lot of it too, where
yeah,
if you weren't an adept, you couldn't figure it out. And I just thought that was a funny way to describe him. Yeah, there's an entire cult around Manly P Hall, who actually jumped in the 90s, jumped the fence at the Bruton Chapel um, in the middle of the night, and started digging up
yeah,
the graveyard. And that was actually what finally got the Rockefellers to sign off, or the church, and it's a whole thing. I mean, after she wrote that book is right when the Rockefellers swooped in and
yeah, yeah. I mean, and
bought
she
all of
described,
Williamsburg.
yeah, and that vault, as you know, she
Hmm.
described it as having treasures that weren't just normal, like what people think of silver and gold and jewels. It was treasures, historical treasures that could turn the tables on or upend traditionally known or accepted history,
Yeah.
religion, history, the whole thing. and I thought she said it could shake the pillars of history, and I thought, wow,
I, so I'd like to show you one day. I've got an alignment from Williamsburg. Like I told you about the tree of life. You've got your own
yeah,
tree of life in Williamsburg, and then the encode of the Great Pyramid of Giza right there in the original triangular piece of land in between the two oldest roads in the whole country, making the triangle, and then pointing all the way to perfectly pointing to the Great Pyramid of Giza. There's another
okay,
alignment. If you take the Wren building, and Sir Christopher Wren, of course, was the what was it,
Royal
the
Society,
Royal Society, and then obviously he was kind of at the helm, um, uh, at the very beginnings of, the Grand Lodge of London. And
yeah,
so the first building built at William and Mary, and that's my whole thing, is that William and Mary was built and has been stewarded by some hand of the Masons from its beginning all the way till present day. And I, not that like there's always like a master mason is the president of the college or anything, but
yeah,
somebody around influences till this day how things are built, where they're placed, where statues are placed, because it's too insane. Um, recently, I the entire, I don't want to turn this all into my research, but you'll get, because you're a Mason, you'll probably love this. I recently overlaid the layout of a lodge room over the campus of William and Mary, and I told this to another Mason one time, and he was like, "Look at my arms, I've got goosebumps." But
yeah,
you literally have where the Master Mason would sit, you have the Christopher Wren building, and then where like the chaplain would sit, you have where the first, like where the chapel is, and
yeah,
then where all these buildings match up all the way to the opposite end, the western end. There is a little courtyard that is filled with busts of famous Virginians of one family. Can you guess which family that would be? Being a Mason, they're right on the outside of the western end of my overlay.
yeah.
It's the Tyler family.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah. Three busts of Tyler's sitting outside right where a Tyler would be. For people who don't know, the Tyler is the
Yeah,
he's like the security guard kind of guy of the ceremonially or whatever, but he's the guy who sits, um back in the day, sword drawn at the door, or outside the door, near the door. It changes whether it's a European or but anyway, I have an alignment that goes, the Wren building is the shape of a U right now because
yeah,
it was supposed to be a square, an elongated square, an oblong square, which you know what that is. And so much so that Thomas Jefferson, when he was the chancellor of the school, I think it was chancellor was his title. He had gone to school there, then come back, and then the revolution started, and so he left again. But right before the revolution started, he had started finishing the U and turning it into the square. And we have his with his blueprints for it. And in the early 2000s, they actually did an excavation and found the beginnings of the walls. They had to abandon it because the revolution started and it never got finished. But if you go from the bottom right corner of where that square would have been and draw a line all the way to the cave church of Antioch in Turkey, um, which is where the legend is that the Spear of Destiny was uncovered, buried underneath the altar at St. Peter's Cave Church. I mean, it's literally a cave. It is where St. Peter preached after
yeah,
the death of Christ. I mean, it was you draw a line from that corner, it crosses its opposite corner perfectly, goes all the way through Oak Island. I mean, and you know how hard it is to like line up Oak Island.
Yeah.
It is a teen when you're looking at alignments and stuff like that, it is the so this thing goes from those two corners, William and Mary, the Wren building, through Oak Island, right through the middle of Nolan's Cross on Oak Island, straight through Constantinople, and right at the door of St. Peter's Church. And I'm gonna shut my dumb mouth and I'm gonna let you
No,
go.
no.
But my thought has always been, and with Jesse's Masonic and possible like kind of Templar connection, I've always thought of these places that have like Templar connections to them, this vault, Oak Island, as almost safety deposit boxes for the kind of outlawed Templars
Yeah.
after they were all outlawed in 1307. They took off with a bunch of ships, had a bunch of stuff, and they
Mhm.
needed to hold it places. And that's why I don't think they'll really ever find anything on Oak Island. I think whatever was there isn't there anymore, but it was
Well, there's
there.
people who watch it to this day.
Oh, I watch it. I watch every
I mean,
episode. Yeah.
watchers,
Yeah.
people who have watched it for centuries,
Yeah.
and they keep an eye on stuff. I used to watch the show a lot, and then I noticed one of the guys on the show started wearing a baseball cap with the
Yeah.
compass, square and compasses on it, and I thought, yeah,
Yeah.
it's that's all. I quit watching it around that time. Not anti Mason, just thinking, oh yeah, they're not going to find anything.
It's
So
co-opted. Yeah. Um, but and even that vault that Marie Bauer Hall talked about, there was probably something there at some point. Maybe it's not there. I mean, Williamsburg is lousy with tunnels.
yeah,
Officially, nowadays, they will. The official story is there's no tunnels under Williamsburg, but I literally know two people who own houses in the colonial district, old, like early 1800s, late 1700s homes, where there is a um, entrance to the tunnel system.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's there's more going on there than
There's so many
everybody
tunnels,
knows.
and I believe you. I know. I believe wholeheartedly. There's tunnels under Williamsburg. Um, hell, there's little towns in Texas with tunnels under them that are
Yeah,
attributed to KGC and other people. And
yeah,
I know for a fact, like Shreveport, Louisiana, um, they have a tunnel system that runs from the Scottish Rite Temple to the courthouse, and also from it was from the Scottish Rite Temple to the courthouse, and also from the temple to a nearby synagogue, a Jewish synagogue. And
really.
yeah, all three connected to one another. And they said during Prohibition they would move booze and all kinds of stuff. So I
Yeah,
thought, okay,
yeah,
and they admit it because there's no denying it. But I know what you're talking about. There's a lot of towns who act like, oh, there's nothing there, and I know for a fact. I was like Marshall, Texas. It's got a tunnel that runs from the courthouse to one of the old stores, and
yeah.
there's a lot of people in the city who claim, oh, it was just a utility tunnel, and I know better than that. Slaves dug it long ago, and it was more than just a utility tunnel. But
Well, now they attribute all the tunnels under any tunnel that they'll because people are still constantly going down into the storm drains connecting into the tunnels.
yeah,
Like, and the big thing is that you can get in Williamsburg, you can get from the tunnels, you can get into the crypt underneath the Wren building where like Lord Botetourt and like I believe the Paynes or the anyway, the Randolphs are buried, and
yeah,
it was a thing in the 1800s and around the turn of the century for the fraternities at the campus of William and Mary, where Greek letter system was created, um, to do like ritual in the crypt and to write to go in and literally take bones out of the coffins there and bring them back to their secret society like houses and whatnot, which
yeah.
I'm really close to releasing another episode. I'm pretty sure I've kind of broken the connection between Phi Beta Kappa and Skull and Bones. There's tangentially one already there in that um, Russell was pissed off. He was at Yale and pissed off that Phi Beta Kappa wanted to go public and not be secretive anymore. And then
Yeah.
him and Taft created Skull and Bones. But I can show you on the Phi Beta Kappa key, like their symbol. I think an encode of the 322 and also how each letter kind of means skull and bones. It's wild.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shut up. You go ahead, man.
No, no, keep on. I think between the two of us, we could piece a lot of things together.
I think
Uh,
so, man. I would be really interested to see your template in relation to Oak Island and see if it also goes over to the
yeah,
Middle East like that too. If you know what
I've,
I'm
I've
saying?
every once in a while, I'll get dead tired. My eyes start getting extra blurry. Working on the template will kill your eyes. I did this for years,
Yeah.
and that plus I worked at Dell. I was selling computers for Dell years ago, and you're working 8 9 hours a day selling. You're on the computer, like with your face right in the computer,
Yeah.
and then you get home. I get home, and my passion was the template, the treasures, Jesse, all of that, and I would spend the rest of my time on the computer. And after a while, I noticed I hit 50. When I turned 50, my eyes just started really dimming. I thought,
Yeah.
what? Don't go blind. I can't go blind. But let me see. There's a couple of pictures I'm looking through while you were talking. I was looking through some others. Um, yeah, there's one too. There's a lot of photos. If you want, I can just go through some of the photos and
Yeah.
explain
Pull up
some of
whatever
it
images. I think
while we're
people will
talking.
really appreciate that because I love when they do that on podcasts because it really gives a decent
All
frame
right.
of reference for what we're talking about because it's so like kind of obscure and esoteric in nature that okay.
Can This was from Fulcanelli's Mysteries of the Cathedrals, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it in French. It was published in French, and fortunately, somebody translated it. So they were talking about the crisscross lines, and the template. When I showed you the grid is also similar to crisscross lines, and I noticed there's a lot of religions throughout world history that have crisscrossed lines on some of their religious art.
Yeah.
They would carve it, paint it, draw it, whatever. But anyway, that was one of the things I was. This was in the very beginning, and I came across Fulcanelli. And when you mentioned Manly P. Hall being kind of a huckster because he would get you right up to the edge, but he wouldn't tell you the secrets. He'd tell you just enough to get your interest.
Yep.
That reminded me of Fulcanelli. That's why I brought this up. Talking about the crisscross lines, I was looking into it, but when you get into where is it? Right here. He was talking about and this sign has been called by the ancient authors the seal of Hermes, seal of the wise, being put being put instead of scale, skull, which confuses the mind of seekers. And that was all I wanted to say on that part. Is just they purposely put things out there to
Yeah.
confuse people, and
Yeah.
and I thought, well, that makes perfect sense. They're hiding things. They've been hiding things for centuries. And like you meant, Jesse James, he was an important character in American history. He was an important character in his day. He's a historical figure, but in the scheme of this whole story, he was just one small part.
He
There
was a
were others.
cog.
Lafitte
Yeah.
the pirate. He was a
Yeah.
pirate. He was an outlaw. He was also a Freemason, just like Jesse James was.
Hmm.
Um, and there's so many more. What bothers me is the fact that I know there's a lot more out there that'll never be known to history, and
Yeah.
they're just that. And I don't know. For some reason that always it's kind of a downer, but that's just I guess that's how they wanted it. I don't know, but
Well, yeah, I mean that's the whole point of their secrecy is
yeah,
to keep those secrets. And I love that they have a name for people like me. I get not you anymore, but you were this until you joined the lodge. But um
Cowan.
yeah, Mason without an apron.
Yeah.
which I thought was really cool. That's what they referred to me as a couple of times, and I was like, yeah, I'm digging figuring some of this stuff out without the cheat sheet.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is huge for me. This is
Same here.
the yeah
This ties into most every part of this story is the tree of life.
yep
And I mean, the KGC template I showed you earlier, it's a
yes
representation of the tree of life. Everything ties in with the tree of life, everything in this story. The template is the tree of life. The veil, the KGC template, it looks like, it's just a grid system, but each cell on that grid is basically a representation of the tree of life. And you can
wow
draw it. I can't tell you how many hours I spent before it dawned on me. It's all the tree of life. Um, Not
wow
only that, there's a lot more out there, but like here's how the tree of life line. It starts in Virginia. I laid this over a map. It's not exact, but it starts in Williamsburg and ends. I don't. You can't see where I'm pointing. I don't know. Can you
no
see
I
my?
can see it yeah I can see your cursor
Okay. So the cursor, it starts in Williamsburg. This is the Kabbalistic tree of life overlaid on an ancient map, and
yeah
that's the main pillar. This is where the hidden pillar would be, or the hidden Sephira, the one they call the 11th Sephira. Some people do.
yep
It's known as the abyss, knowledge, things like that. And
yep
that's not right at where the Bell Witch Cave is, but it's not far from it.
wow
And then this is in Arkansas, Tiferet, Beauty.
yep
And then you go on down. There's, I think that was Hod, and then Malkuth. And Hod, this one right here, this is Victory. I can't remember the name, its name right off the Netzach stands for victory, or it means translates to victory. That was
hmm
near Georgetown, Texas, and that was the one of the sites right there that Wagner Carr showed us when they
oh
removed
wow
when they recovered that gold in that site. Right now, there's an apartment complex on top of it. They just did that in the last few years. Um, but anyway, Wagner Carr had his driver take us out there when it was just country, and there was a big pit, big dip in the ground. There was a cave there with little railroad tracks that went down into the cave. We didn't get to see that. We saw where the tracks were, but he said the Texas Rangers oversaw the recovery of that treasure, and it took several 18 wheelers, several trips each to remove the gold in that spot.
wow
He said you would go down they had a little mining cart with the little tracks, and it would
hmm
go to the edge, and then they had a pulley because there was a 20-foot drop, about 20 foot, and the room was stacked with gold. He said it was ancient Spanish gold and gold from the Spaniards, and it went through from the Spaniards. That was the earliest, and then there was treasures from the 1800s and the early 1900s. He
so
even told
again
us Pretty Boy Floyd, when he was way up, running around in the Midwest and the northern part of the country, he would come down to San Antonio, and he would stop at that location and make deposits, not withdrawals, but deposits. And I thought,
wow
and I kept asking him more questions. It's like, okay, why was there a network of outlaws and other people who were making deposits here? He wouldn't answer me. He was a Mason. Also, I wasn't at that time. I don't know if he would have told me or not, but if once I became a Mason, but he died before I became one. Anyway, there's that alone opens up a lot of questions. Is a network of good guys, perceived bad guys? I guess, in the way I look at it, without getting off this topic, is it's an age old war that's been going on like a Cold War, in my
yeah
opinion, for centuries. And you'll have a pope come out and he'll condemn Freemasons and say they're of the devil and this and that. And then you'll have others seem more open to it, others are against it. Long story short, it's like a Cold War with little hot flashes every once in a while. And I
yeah
think that's part of it. But that's why, if you're having a Cold War, it's just like any government. You've got CIA spies who are trained to break the law in other countries. Just the fact that they're a spy in another country is breaking the law. in our opinion, they're the good guys, but in other people's opinion, they're the bad
Yeah.
guys. So
Well, what's interesting about that is that's kind of where I've come to with conspiracy theory as a whole. And you can go back real far to the ancient mystery schools, but I think in at least recorded kind of history that we can be kind of
yeah,
back through um from the dark ages up, I would say. What it kind of seems like is the Catholic Church kind of versus this mystery school, which has
yeah.
taken the form of masonry, but
The
I think
mystery school, like you mentioned, yeah, it's taken a form of masonry, but also Rosicrucianism,
yeah,
Gnostic Christianity, and there's
yeah,
a
I
lot of other belief systems that tie into that.
yeah, and I think that's well, you've got the Catholic Church on one side and all of its different arms and interests, and then you have and banks and things like that,
Yeah,
and then you've got this thing that broke away, um that Bacon was a big part of kind of modernizing, and I think it's been this struggle back and forth. Now, I always say there's no good guys in this
yeah,
situation necessarily. I think there's good people in on each side, but
yeah,
I think these are two factions sort of wrestling over the kind of the control,
yeah,
control
exactly.
and
And
influence. You've got Masons on one side who have been able to kind of infiltrate and kind of get their hands into politics and things like that and promote and steer things the way they wanted or needed them to go. And Rome and the Catholic Church, they've been doing that since second century, first century.
yeah,
um and what's interesting is everywhere that my masonry and kind of secret American history leads me, what I find is just a few years before that particular location, the Jesuits or the Catholics in some form
yeah,
were there. Williamsburg in particular, the Jesuits were there. They had a Jesuit mission in Williamsburg in the 1580s, and this whole thing where they stole one of Powhatan's nephews. They took him to Cuba. Then they took him to Spain. Then they brought him back thinking we've indoctrinated him. And, they gave him a name like Joseph or something like that. And they
yeah,
thought they'd come back over and he would help them kind of convert the rest and do whatever they were doing, which I think was just trying to expand their territory into the new
yeah,
world. There was a,
yeah,
a big rush to do that ever since Columbus or whatever. And but that didn't work out for him and they all got taken out. That dude took the first chance he got once he got back to the Americas to go find his people, and they came and tore them all up. But then 1607, 20 years later, here comes Sir Gabriel Archer and the Francis Bacon crew, and goes right up past through the Chesapeake Bay onto the James River and right up the this one particular creek that Gabriel Archer was adamant that they put the settlement at, and
yeah,
that ends up becoming the campus of William and Mary later on. They changed the name from Archer's Hope to College Creek, which
yeah.
I
And it
that
wasn't
last picture that
exactly.
go
Oh
ahead.
yeah. Well,
So,
what you just pointed out, they were adamant about the location they were going to. They already knew
yeah.
exactly where they wanted to go because it tied in with their plan. And I think the Tree of Life is a perfect that was a big part of their plan. If you wanted me to go back to this one,
Yeah, so what I found, and I wish I could share my cursor too, but I can't. But so the bottom separate down here by
oh yeah,
Calacuas.
that's where Victoria Peak, New Mexico is, and they
Is
found billions in gold. The stories goes, And there's a lot of people who go, "Oh, there was nothing found," and the Army denies it completely. Not the Army, the Air Force. They
Yeah.
deny it completely. Yet there's documentaries on Victoria Peak and their treasure. There were three airmen who underwent polygraph tests. They were interviewed over and over by various experts, and they were all talking about the treasure they saw and the results on all their tests. And the experts said they were not lying. From all indications, they were telling the truth. Not only that, I mentioned in my book, former Attorney General for New Mexico had said he did, it was a weird double speak way of saying it. Uh, there's too much there, or there's too much around it not to discount the story. Or he said it in a weird
Yeah.
way like that. But basically, there was a lot of people. Doc Noss, the guy who found it, I think he screwed up when he filled out a treasure trove permit. That just sent up red flags, and everybody in the country, anybody who knew anything about that, knew what he
Yeah.
was talking about. He ended up getting shot in the back of the head, and that was the end of his story.
No
So
kidding.
yeah,
Well, I
so
got a question for you about that particular location. I- in that peak area, is there a water source there at all that like a
I,
one that you would jump right out at you?
let me
Because what
pull
I
that.
found in these trees of life, they mine at the campus, it falls that Sephiroth falls right dead center of the middle of the Cremdell Pond. And the Cremdell Pond is the very end of Archer's Hope, which is the creek that they went up. They didn't dam it up, but they closed off one piece of it to make this pond at some point, um, right right there, and it's got a very obnoxiously colored and obnoxiously angled bridge that goes over it. This little footbridge, the Cremdell Bridge, where people uh, it's a big ritual every year. Like the seniors jump off of it,
Yeah,
but they uh, it reminds me of the Bridge, which ties into which
Norse
ties in
mythology.
and it sits on this water source, right? And then directly up from that next Sephiroth directly up from it, where
This one,
mine's no down. Yes.
this one. Yeah. All right.
Um, that one is means foundation. I can't
Yeah,
remember the Hebrew name for it, but it means foundation.
it's
Now,
yes, God.
Yasad, yes. So at William and Mary, you've got the Cremdell Pond, and then directly up from it in 2010, and this is why I say I just feel like somebody recognizes something and goes, okay, I'll allocate you this land on campus for that thing, right?
Yeah,
Because in 2010, the geology department at the school put a big rock garden there. Okay. Now,
yeah,
so they have these massive, but there's no rocks. I mean, Williamsburg is like a below sea level like area. So we're not like a rocky place or anything. Like obviously it's the geology department, they're going to put rocks. So it's a big
yeah,
rock garden, but there's these massive boulders, right? In this
yeah.
place, and it just happens to fall right where foundation is, rock foundation. The weirdest
Mm,
part is that right exactly in the rock garden where that Sephiroth sits is on top of a completely out of place rock. So all the other rocks are just regular, non-hewn, just boulders, right?
yeah.
And then right exactly where that sits is a slab of hewn, square, rectangular, huge piece of granite that like came
Wow.
out of a quarry, right? And then what's really weird about that is I have found the
Like
money
the
pit
national.
encoded into the campus of that into the sunken garden of William and Mary,
Yeah,
which that sits at the very end. And there's all these crosswalk lines that go across the sunken garden. and there's exactly enough of them to space them out to be the 8 levels at 10 feet. You know what I'm saying? They're not 10 feet
Yeah.
apart, but they are a scale or a multiplication of there's 8 of them, and they're equidistant apart, and you know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
when they found the money pit, they dug down, got 10 feet, and they got to a platform. And then they dug down 10 feet, got to a platform, until they got to 90 feet, exactly where this stone slab sits at William and Mary, right? So
Mhm.
the ninth equidistant like part lands directly on top of this one stone that is a piece of granite, which I think the Oak Island lore was it was a flat piece of like limestone or something like that, but it had a message carved into it. But that's my 90-foot stone. And the crazy thing is like I said, below that, geographically speaking, below that, you run into the water. And what's below the 90-foot stone at Oak Island but water? And that's where once they got to the 90-foot stone, they pulled it up and they couldn't go any further because all of a sudden the thing started filling with water. And like I
Yeah.
said, I have an alignment that goes directly, like that points straight to Oak Island. It's
Okay.
it's it's weird, but at the same time, I've found references to water with that Sephiroth. And then I found references to Foundation where the rock sits. And then likewise, all the other Sephiroth land on the different buildings, and like the one that's like knowledge is like is where the original library was. And then, of course, the very top is Kether, which is crown, which marries the masculine and the feminine. And
Uh-huh.
the crown, and William and Mary was named after the crown, King William and
Yeah.
Queen Mary. And it's
That's what I
a
was gonna
male
say.
and a
Like,
female. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, because one side of the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life, is male, the other side's female. The
Right
central
side male,
pillar,
left side female. Yep.
yeah,
And
and I've read legends and I've heard sermons from different rabbis online. They'll talk about the tree of life. The center pillar is harmony between the two, but
yep.
it broke off. It broke off because of the sin of man, the fall of man, and
Hmm.
that way, or because of that, you can't just go straight from here, from Malkuth straight up and connect to God. In They're not everybody's view, but a lot of different views. You have to follow this path highlighted by the yellow line.
Mm.
But that goes from like male side, the female side, um, and what you're saying is where male and female meet, or that's where that triggered my memory. It just blew my mind where they met. William and Mary. It was
Yep.
William and Mary, male and female.
Yep.
That's the perfect one. And they were, it was their royalty. It was crown. That stands for, Keither is the crown. Beyond
Yep.
Keither, uh, beyond Keither is Einsof or I can't ever pronounce that correctly. Every time I say it, people correct me, and then I'll say it that way, and then somebody else corrects me back to the way I was saying it. So
Yeah.
anyway, Einsof are like it's nothingness where God was. A lot of them say, a lot of rabbis I've listened to have said God is like, they say no thing. You can't comprehend what God is. He's no thing, nothing. From and like in the beginning of the Bible, from everything came from nothing. Uh,
Is
and he
and
never
is that
thought.
above? Is that above Kether?
Yes, like out
Okay.
here in where the ocean would be. And I
Okay.
thought
So
that sounds perfect. It's emptiness. It's nothing. It's an open sea. And
here's
that
what's
to me,
interesting on here's what's interesting with mine, because mine is, well, it's the interesting thing is that you just had up.
yeah,
I believe if I looked at it, that William and Mary sits at that exact angle as well.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? So I
yeah.
think so you take that and you shrink it down to the size of a college campus and just move it up on
Well,
William and
and
Mary where Kether sits, and I have that
yeah,
same thing built within the campus of William and Mary. So go one down like to the middle one.
right
Yes.
here, Tiferet.
Okay. Well, that separate sits right in the middle of the sunken garden, and that one is beauty.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
beauty.
saying?
Yep.
What better? So I've got water that represents the first one going straight up the middle. I've got water, then I've got foundation that sits on a big granite
Yeah.
slab that is out of place. And then I've got beauty sitting in the middle of the garden. And then of course I've got Kether, which
Biggie.
is the crown, William and Mary, the king and the
Yeah.
queen. But above that, obviously, if you go to the right of what you've got your cursor on now, that's where Williamsburg sits. Now, the college was in Williamsburg before there was just the Bruton Parish Church, which Marie Bauer is where Marie Bauer Hall's vault was. Okay, that was there, but basically nothing else was there. It was called Middle Plantation, and nothing else was there except for farmland until it was sold to, I guess, the colony by I think John Page, who, if you follow his family all the way back, they come from the Pajams, which were French knights, a knightly French noble family from the south of France. Anyway, but above where you're talking about this unseen no thing, that's where Colonial Williamsburg is. That's where the
Yeah.
town of Williamsburg is, which was built kind of like DC on this concept of a New Jerusalem. And I believe the kingdom that we're supposed to, and the Christians are supposed to inherit after Armageddon and everything, is like the new Israel, the new Jerusalem, like the city
Yeah.
where we all live with God and everybody's in their perfect bodies and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so that's supposedly where God dwells on with what you're talking about. And then above this in my diagram is Williamsburg, which was built on the concept of the New Jerusalem, which is kind of where God dwell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all. This is why I called you like 5 years or emailed you 5 years ago when I saw your tree of life in that book. I was like, dude, this is it. All right, go ahead.
Oh no, no, keep going. I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to keep from jumping all over the place with the photos while looking for other photos, if that makes sense.
This is a
Um,
good one too.
let me see. Uh, there was a photo I know is in here. There's so many of them. I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure
No, I
out.
understand.
Well, like on the Tree of Life, what you were talking about, Bruton. Okay, Keither, I believe, is William and Mary College,
Yeah.
um, and like you said, and this is where I'm always torn. I don't know. It makes more sense to me that Bruton Parish Church, would represent God or Ein Sof,
Yeah.
or
And that's
maybe
where it would
that's
land on mine.
yeah, and maybe that's Ein Sof, and then Ein Sof R could be the ocean. I don't know. I've always wondered which is which, but it makes perfect sense to me, especially like let me pull that up again. There was a better map I pulled up a minute ago, and now I'm searching for it. Um, some of those, let's see, I'll just pull this one up. Anyway, like Williamsburg is here. What was I getting at? There was something about now. Now I get it's like all these different photos and everything's coming together in my mind at once. But anyway, I do believe that, like you said, like this is William and Mary. Right up the street is the church. I believe that would be
Yep.
Representative God or Ein Sof or
Hmm.
because it doesn't make sense to me. Well, it makes more sense to me that would be it and not the ocean. But the ocean, I don't know. I'm back and forth
Yeah.
all the time on that. It's
Yeah.
interesting trying to figure out which one it could be. But
Yeah.
uh, I do think, and I have plans somewhere for the layout of Bruton Parish Church. I was going to bring that up, but I can't. I don't see them on here yet. But yeah, it just blew my mind that here's another thing I wanted to show before I forget is Scottish Rite double-headed eagle.
Yep.
It's got the 33rd above it. That's
Hmm.
also representative of the Tree of Life.
Okay.
The
So it
double-headed
with the
eagle.
33 would be the crown.
that I believe 33 is is Ein Sof Or. That represents God, I think.
Okay. Oh,
Like,
there's a crown right there.
yeah,
Duh.
and then there's the crown, which is Kether, and then you've got
Yep.
wisdom and understanding, and then
Hmm.
it just goes back and forth. They do the tree differently, but I've seen other masons uh, draw the diagram of a tree of life on this in the middle of the breast. I keep pointing at it like people are going to see my
They
finger,
can
but
see it. They can see it. Oh, with your finger. Yeah.
yeah. In the middle of the breast would be beauty, Tiferet,
Yep.
and then it goes down to Netzach, Had, Yasad, Foundation, and then the
What's interesting to me right now is you got your cursor right now on a very arced. Remember I was telling you about that really obnoxious bridge, the Crimdale Bridge that goes over
yeah,
my bottom Sephiroth? It
yeah,
it's like that shape. Again, it could
it's
be just
wild.
stupid confirmation bias, but it's very now I got something else to look at is kind of
Yeah,
overlaying this
it's pretty cool. But yeah, and here's
yeah.
the layout of the Tree of Life.
Oh,
Malkuth,
I there is one thing.
yeah,
Um the window at Bruton Parish Church.
yeah, I've got that in
Dude,
here.
dude. Well, I mean, all you got to do is pull up one of those templates, and it is so close to the KGC template, it's ridiculous. And what I was going to tell you, and I think we may have talked about this years ago, but what I was going to tell you is that window
Yeah,
specifically is crazy important. That window right above on the top, they have
yeah,
not only preserved that window, the original window, but they built um, the new library. It's not that new anymore, but the the Earl Greg Swim Library on campus over there, and they did a reproduction of that window, exactly that reproduction, and it's massive in the very front of the library. Now that library right out in front of it has this courtyard with a sundial in the middle of it, and I've tried to find alignments with that, and I know something's there, but I can't figure it out quite yet. But what's interesting is I was like, man, it seems like a lot. I mean, seems like a whole lot of much ado about nothing. It's a window. Like, yeah, it was
yeah,
probably a pretty impressive thing to put together. But not only did they put a huge replica of that window in that building, that looks over where that window sits is like the boardroom for the
yeah,
the thing. Well, I've looked up pictures of the inside of the boardroom just to kind of get a look of the window from the inside. And what I noticed was all of the boardroom chairs have that exact design of the window
yeah.
engraved into the back of the like that that's not just a
It's
window. Somebody
there's a
cares.
lot more
Oh,
to it, and it's
yeah.
obvious, so obvious. There's so much more meaning to it. Like what you're saying, for it to be on the boardroom chairs,
Yeah.
the design and all, just it's so
It's a
much
window. I mean,
more
that place is
than just a
imbued with
window.
so much symbolism and so much history for
Yeah,
them to take the window that was at Bruton Parish and just start mashing it onto everything. Like it, and you don't ever, I mean, you hear about the window. The window is a big deal
yeah,
at the church, but then they started, and it's also, it is, it's also, they have an exact replica of that window in on the chapel side of the Christopher Wren building. It directly above, and I don't know if you've ever looked at the Wren Chapel, but the Wren Chapel looks just like a lodge room.
yeah.
See,
There, the lodge room design, the layout of the lodge room is so it's in so many things.
yeah,
Well, not only that, the stone of foundation is also represented by a lot of this. And
yeah,
the template is also a part of the stone of foundation. There's a design for it that looks a lot like the template and the window. Um,
yeah,
but the lodge room itself, it's not. It's the earth. It's the cosmos. It's the earth, and it's everything. It's the
yeah.
movement of the sun on the ecliptic of the sun. Uh, where the altar is, there's a lot about the lodge room that ties in so deep with multiple layers of symbolism. It's insane. I'm not
Yeah.
insane, but it's just it can. It's a
It
lot
goes
to
deep.
drink. Yeah, it's like drinking
Yeah.
from a fire hydrant if you're trying to do it all at once. And I think that's, over the years, it took me a long time to figure out a lot of this stuff. And you start piecing it together as you it's almost like your mind is ready for the next step. You've accepted this, and then the other starts to fall into place.
Yeah. And if you
And,
think you're gonna sit down and like, because I've done that, I'll be like,
yeah,
okay, I got like 3 days off. I'm just gonna sit with a notebook and the internet and my books, and I'm gonna figure this out. And
yeah,
then you realize that you have looked at like the window for like 4 hours and like what it could, you know what I mean? Or even worse, the window takes you to this thing, and then you start trying to
yeah,
figure, it's nuts. But there's so much there, you know what I
yeah,
mean? That
yeah,
it can't be. I mean, I've even taken years ago when we were first talking, I took um some of my like the Tree of Life thing
yeah,
to the director of the historic campus, and she looked at it and was like, I was like, has anybody, I was trying to prove myself wrong because I was like, I'm too dumb to have come up with this. Like, I obviously watched, National Treasure or the Da Vinci Code too recently. Like, I couldn't have figured something out. And I took it to her because I was just trying to get I was trying to get her to tell me where I could find the oldest map of the campus.
yeah.
And that was my reason for contacting her. And I showed it to her, and she was like, yeah, she was like, this is really interesting. And this is the director of the historic campus. And she was like, no, this is something. She was like, this is,
Wow.
yeah. Um, which encouraged me. I kind of wish sometimes she had just been like, no, you're a moron. Go away. And then maybe this wouldn't be rattling around in my head all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
But
that was
the window thing, I remember when you pulled that out, I was like, holy crap, that it looks the same.
that's how. And I don't want to. I'm not trying to interrupt.
No,
Um,
go.
when I
I'm
was working
talking
with
too
the
much.
templates, no, you're not. I found out there's a lot. Well, the template, there's a medium, large, and small template. And
Okay.
this is like the small and the medium template and how they fit together.
Yeah.
Like here's the center. Anyway, there's a total of 9 templates. It's like there's 8 on the outside and then one in the center. It's 9. Each one has 33 points inside it. And it
Wow.
just keeps. And I thought there can't be that many treasures. I mean that you get up there, it's like one large template would hold conceivably up to 3,300 template treasures, and it's not that. That's not how it is. The way I look at it is like, you've got the grid system, like I showed earlier. So you've got the grid system, it overlays the country, but it reminds me of a grid layout for a city, and you've got vacant lots. Only on this, there'd be a lot more vacant lots than there are treasures.
Yeah.
But if there's a treasure in an area, if they know the template, if you're in the know, you know to go to one of those, those locations. And that's how that works. I'm sure they had other, and I'm not pretending I've solved every piece of this by any means.
Yeah.
I know enough now to get around, and I know what people are talking about, but I think there's a lot more to this than what I would even imagine. Um, and I was
Go back to
mentioning
that one. Go back to that one real quick.
this one or
Yeah.
that.
No, the
Which
other
one?
one.
Okay.
I was just whenever I see numbers, I
Yeah,
always
that's the
like figure.
medium sized tip. And
Okay.
in the book I mentioned so many. There are spiritual beliefs and esoteric beliefs and meanings behind just about every number. 19, for example. God, this like what is that? The metatonic cycle. And then there's
Okay.
19 is also symbolism in Kabbalah for Eve, things
Oh
like
wow.
that. I mean, it just keeps going and going. 10, 49, 49 is 7 times 7. You've got all these.
Mm,
It's just it keeps going, but and you don't know. There's points where you keep going and going, and it keeps taking you further down rabbit holes, and it that always I'll reach a stopping point, and I'm thinking. Fulcanelli said they purposely put things out to confuse the mind of the seeker, and I think some of this is just that confusing the mind of the seeker.
yeah.
That's Alphorus, the statue of Alphorus and his crisscross belt. I don't know if you know the legend of Alphorus. He was a giant who, uh, the baby Jesus, you can see the baby here, was needed
Yeah.
to cross a. And I don't know who the man with the lantern is in this woodcut in the background by the cabin. I don't know what he symbolizes. Knowledge keeper, passing the lantern. I don't know, but that's
Mm,
supposed to be baby Jesus, and Alphorus takes baby Jesus on his shoulder and walks him across a swollen river. But the crisscross belt, Fulcanelli went into great detail on the crisscross belt. It ties
mhm.
in with the Epiphany cake in New Orleans and Louisiana during Epiphany. If I don't know if you know about king cakes, but
Oh,
you
yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
traditional ones have the crisscross line, the crosshatch design on the crust, and in the center there's a baby Jesus, and
Right.
it's supposed to be symbolic of the alchemical process for getting rid of or using mercury, the crisscross lines, to pull out the infant, the baby Jesus, the pure gold stuff. There's a lot of
Oh,
symbolism
wow.
in all that. The tarot card with their crosshatch design, the net. That was
Yeah.
another thing. It doesn't just tie into Kabbalah and alchemy, but it also ties in with, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Indra's net or the net of Indra
No.
in Buddhist beliefs, but it's
No.
supposed to be like a grid system similar to this, um, that the where each thread crosses, there's a jewel that mirrors every other part of the net, and that reminds me of the template in the grid system.
Wow.
It's the same thing. It's like conformity through across the universe, and the template is in a way like that. And that's yeah. Here's Ein Sof R and Ein Sof. It was the
Yeah.
boundless light, the boundless, and no thing or nothing. Which I think Ein would be Bruton Parish Church. Ein Sof may be the sea. I don't know.
Mhm. And then Ein Sof would be the mid I mean, you keep going, you end up in the Middle
Yeah,
East,
it
you
could
know?
be. Easily. I don't, and that's where, and that makes to me perfect sense. I'm not sure. Uh,
Wow.
oh, and this was a ancient map. It was the cover piece of Porte Lucius. It was a book written, and I'm probably mangling the pronunciation. As Porte Lucius is how it's Gates of Light. Uh, uh, Paolo Riccio was he was supposedly a Jewish man who converted to Catholicism back in 1516 when he took the writings. I think it was Abraham Abulafia, a well-known rabbi,
Uh-huh.
and he translated it into Latin for the Catholic Church. And
Okay.
this was the woodcut on the front of the book. It printed it on the front of the book. It shows a Jewish man. There's the crosshatched symbol, um,
Yeah.
and he's pointing at the floor, which got me. I thought, what is he pointing at? And it looks. I have it in my book, and I may have it on one of the other illustrations. He's pointing at the floor. That looks like waves to me. And then I got an old map and overlaid it, and it's the coast of the New World. He's dressed for travel.
Wow.
He's yeah, and then
Right.
I mean, even the
Oh, yeah,
crosshatch
look at all
design.
his instruments and stuff like that on his
Yeah,
belt.
he's got the satchel. He's got the knife or the dagger. He's got boots on. He's in the coat.
And that the ground that he's on looks a lot more like map lines than it
Yeah,
does you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah. And in the chair, if you'll notice the chair, I don't know if you'd ever seen America Unearthed with Scott Wolter.
I've seen it, yeah, but it's been
He
a
was real
while.
big into the hooked X symbol. He wasn't happy about me mentioning him and the hooked X in my book. I don't know. I won't get into that, but it's in my
Really?
book. Yeah, I left it in there. I wasn't going to take it out. Those, to me, it was an important part. But he was all big. He was big into the hooked X. And if you look at the chair the guy's sitting on, it looks
Yeah.
like an X, and then the dagger would be the hook on it. I don't know if that's what it
Oh
is
wow.
or if it was just a coincidence. I don't know. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of symbolism in this. Let me go back real quick. Yeah, there's that. There's the floor untouched. That's how it was. I drew the line of what I thought would be the coastline, and I overlaid the map on it of the New World
Oh
at the
wow.
time. And you can see it roughly lines up with South America, Central America, and North America, and up around Nova Scotia and Canada. And
Wow, dude.
I thought that is wild. There's too many coincidences for it to be a coincidence, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's rad.
But that was tying in. That's where that. And I know. I hope I'm not going too fast or
No,
leaving.
no, no, no. Go at
That was the
your own
ancient.
pace, man. This is awesome.
All right. Yeah, there's the hooked X I mentioned.
You go back to that map real quick.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah. Septentria. Okay. Uh, okay. I like old maps.
Okay.
I just like to peek at them. Yeah.
Oh yeah, let's see. There. That is the layout of the Temple Mount, the dome of the what is that? The
Dome
Temple
of the
Mount.
Rock.
Yeah, Dome of the Rock. Um, this is the Dome of the Rock, and the way they show it lined up. No, it's not actually due north, south, east, and west. It's. I'll get to that later. But
Yeah.
anyway, I was just curious and playing around. I found the best diagram of it that I could find, and I overlaid the template. And I wasn't sure, and I put that there. I wasn't sure how it lined up. Did the outer circle touch the outer walls, or was it more like this one on the bottom?
Right.
There's two circles, and you can see the circle here and the circle there. I think
Yeah.
it's closer to this one. That's just my thoughts. I don't know though. That one had me. It still got me curious, and I'm always wondering: am I just seeing things there? Does it match up? Um,
I don't know, man. That's pretty
Here's how
awesome.
it's really aligned: the actual position.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what got me really interested in how the template lines, because the template is at the same orientation as the actual position of the Dome of the Rock. It's not due north, south,
Mm.
east, and west. And that I thought, okay, there's something there. It's the same angle, it's the same delineation as the template.
Wow.
And so there's something to it. I don't know. And we
Yeah.
know the Templar were there. I think that's where I think my theory is that's where they got the design.
Yeah.
Just well,
I'd love
and
to see
also,
that. I'd love to see that that Bruton Chapel window overlaid on it too.
yeah, yeah, I should do that. I don't know. I may have that here. One second. This is a design on the west end door of the Temple Church in London. And I
Okay.
overlaid, it doesn't fit exactly. I had to squish it in on the sides, but when you squish it in on the sides,
It
the
lines right
temple,
up.
it lines right up. So and that was on, the Temple Church in London.
Right.
Uh, and I hope
Oh yeah.
if I get off
No,
course,
you're
just
good. Keep going. I love it.
at an Arcadia Ego by Poussin. Uh, the shadows, I got to looking at the shadows, and I noticed the shadows they don't seem to, like right here. He was a master painter. Where's the
Yeah.
shadow for this staff? The shadows aren't on. They're
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
And I think he did that on purpose, maybe to draw somebody's eye. I don't know. But when I saw that, I didn't, I thought, okay, is that a heart shape? Like a heart, which is a
Oh
known
wow.
treasure symbol.
Yeah.
It didn't, I think the shadow,
It's a
and then
heart on a rock too.
yeah, and I never figured this out. It looks like a number one or an
Mm.
upside down T. I'm not sure. Uh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that are still mysterious to me on that. Their colors, there's symbolism and everything about that. But I believe that ties in with astrology, with Hercules and others.
Yeah.
Let's see, that was Verrazano's voyage. And yeah, Verrazano, that was just, I had that in my book. Here it is, the harp. I think it could be a harp, which
Oh
lines up
wow.
with it. And I make the connection a lot better. I'm better at writing than I am speaking usually. Uh, I think the harp is symbolic of Lyra, the constellation Lyra, and Vega
Oh,
is in Lyra.
up in Oak Island, there's a if I'm not mistaken, I believe there's a harp petroglyph up in Oak Island that they don't understand why it would have been there.
And remind me of Oak Island again in a minute,
Okay.
because there's a guy named Peter Amundsen who's an
Oh
author.
yeah.
He's also
I've
a
listened to him
Freemason,
because he's done a lot of stuff on
and
Shakespeare,
he
which is another part of my
well,
stuff.
yeah. And when I finished my book, I thought, okay, I'm done. I'm just waiting. I had to wait a while for the publisher to get around to it and the editor. So I had a few months where I was just relaxing. It's like, okay, I put all that out there. People go, I didn't know what to expect. But anyway, so I'm waiting and I would look around at other things, the same topics, just different things. And I stumbled on the Bacon documentary with Peter Amundsen,
Yep.
and then I saw another documentary. It may have been the same one. He went to Oak Island. He
Yeah.
discovered a tree of life symbol,
Yep.
stones, boulders laid out in a pattern of the tree of life. And I thought, oh
Yeah,
my
it's
God.
that's Nolan's Cross. I have an exact encode of Nolan's Cross featuring the borders of the original historic campus where the statue of Lord Botetourt sits is exact because the top stone to the cross uh the like crossbar
Yeah.
stone of Nolan's Cross is exactly 145 feet, and Lord Botetourt's statue right there in the middle of the Wren Garden is exactly 145 feet from the front door, and then it
Wow.
goes, and then it's like 360 feet, um, and that's what it is to the like Jamestown and Richmond Road that make the pyramid. And then you run into, and then it goes down into the down into the garden, and it kind of loses, you kind of lose it, but it stretches the length of the garden, which is the sunken gardens, which
Yeah.
is interesting. But that 360, crossbar of the cross, and then the 145 feet is really interesting. But yeah, I jumped on that, and then also if you yeah, go ahead, keep going.
Do you see what I'm doing right now? Is that
Yeah.
on the screen?
Yep,
Okay.
I
Going through.
got you.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt. I
No,
didn't
no,
even
no, go. No,
realize.
you're good.
Okay. I didn't even realize you could see that while I was doing
Yep.
it. It was something about you, and you feel free to keep talking. I mean, it was the Peter Amundsen, the Tree of Life. There, I found, and you can find it on YouTube. If you can't, I'll send you a link. Plus, I downloaded it years ago.
Yeah,
It
and
was
what's crazy is when he was at Oak Island, he found some incredible stuff and gave them context to some incredible stuff. And his like segment that
yeah,
actually made it to air was like minutes. It was like nothing. You
yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
and
But
that
it
it was a very important part. But
yeah.
there's another link I have. It was and it's on YouTube. Um, Several 33rd degree Masons in Canada. I believe they're in Canada. They
Hmm.
were at a Masonic meeting, a conference, and they were talking about Oak Island
Mm,
and all the everything. I mean, it was, and they filmed it. They put it out publicly. So
really?
it's even if you're a Mason and you're not supposed to talk about some things, they put it out public. If it's public knowledge, then you can talk all you want about it. And
Yeah,
I
I'd
thought,
like to
well,
find that.
with
You're gonna have to send
everything,
that to me.
okay. Yeah, it's three parts. If I can't find the link, I'll send you the videos.
Yeah, yeah, please do.
Let's see. There was something you mentioned a minute ago, and I was looking for it. Yeah, that's dealt with the tree of life, and that's how I've shown that part. Ah, that's not what I was looking for. Let me see.
Just keep flipping through these pictures, man. This is making good content, dude. Because we can break these things down.
All right.
There's great every time you pull one up, you've got awesome information behind all of them.
Well, like Venus, that was a
Hmm.
big part. That was God. I just said his name a minute ago. The guy who painted
Oh,
at
the
Arcadia.
what? Yeah.
God,
Uh,
Poussin, Nicholas
Busan.
Poussin.
Yeah.
Yeah, he. There's a lot that ties in with that, but I also, and this is a theory, and this is getting out there, stuff that I've still got to research. But I think um, Lucas Cranach the Elder, or Cranach.
Okay.
If you look at a lot of his paintings, I think there's a lot of symbols in his paintings that deal with potential locations in Europe and parts of the, or he's just transmitting stories through his artwork, which
Yeah.
Poussin was well known for. He even admitted he hid a lot of symbolism
Oh
and
yeah. I mean,
secret messages in his works.
people have broken down that at whatever in Arcadia
Yeah,
like to death. I mean, the angles of the staffs and everything point
yeah.
to different things. And I just found out like a few days ago as I was watching something, I didn't realize that what's the phrase that's written on that monument there?
Oh God, you.
Can't see it here, but I think it's the name of the painting.
Yeah, at an Arcadia Ego. Let me scroll in and see if I can find. I think the.
Yeah,
I
I
know.
can't
I
see a
know.
second.
Yeah, I
Well,
think it says. I think it says
whatever,
at an Arcadia Ego.
yes, which I think means
Yeah, there's part of
e-
Arcadia.
basically like so Arcadia was like a Greek concept of like paradise.
Yeah,
And again, this just points to a lot of like my research with memento mori, the skull and bones, and this kind of obsession with death, because what somebody was explaining is they're pointing to that phrase because it's a tomb that they're standing there at, and they're
yeah,
pointing to this phrase that says even in Arcadia, basically, or also in Arcadia, so you can't escape death, kind of thing. Like, so even in this Greek pantheon paradise,
yeah,
here is also death. And if you look at the expressions on the faces, I mean, he's pointing at this he's pointing at this phrase, and they're all kind of have these like surprise, like dumbfounded looks on their
yeah,
faces, like,
yeah,
what is a tomb doing here, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And what's interesting is who is in that tomb, like who made it to paradise, but it's still in that tomb, the one tomb in paradise or whatever. Like, that's interesting to me.
and there's a lot of potential answers.
It's a Newport
You
Tower.
could say Jesus, um, he died, but I don't know. There's You could twist it into that. There's a lot of things you could twist it into.
Yeah,
I don't really. I haven't even. That's a damn good question.
yeah.
I didn't even think of who was in the tomb. I just thought, for some reason, in my mind, it was always a treasure.
Well, and then I'm sure you've looked into the the whole uh
Yeah. Well, that was Roosevelt, by the
oh
way,
yeah, oh yeah.
looking for the treasure on Oak Island.
I've tried to find a connection between Roosevelt and the Rockefellers because I know there's a connection between Williamsburg and Oak Island. Um,
Uh-huh.
but
There's
for
the
the
Stone
life of me, I
Foundation.
can't find it.
Stone
Oh
of
yeah.
Foundation. That's a Masonic sign. You can just about
Hmm.
every old courthouse. You can go to any old town, and the seat of the county seat, and you'll find or you'll see that pattern in public buildings.
Oh, oh
It's,
yeah.
it's everywhere. It's usually, I mean, it's symbolic for justice and things like that, but
Right,
because our foundation is, rule of law, etc.
right.
But there's a lot of symbolism behind that. I've, I don't, I'm not sure on that, but I do know the Stoner Foundation and the template share a lot of common traits.
Yeah.
There's more to the template than there is the Stoner Foundation. But like what you were talking about with what was that? Yasad. Yasad was
Yeah.
foundation of the tree of life, and I think that plays a role. And the garden you mentioned with the
Yep.
that one stone that sits out of place kind of
Yep.
reminds me of there's a rough ashlar and then there's the ashlar, the perfect
Yes.
ashlar.
Yeah. Yep.
And that,
Rough stone and then that perfectly hewn stone, and that's supposed to
yeah,
represent the the uh adept and the you know or what you're working towards.
yeah. So oh yeah, that was just Mason's marks. There was one that reminded me of the turkey
Yeah.
track, the fleur de lis, stuff like that. But
Yep.
trying to, and that was the origins that I know of for the tree of life. Um, the ancient Egyptians used the three lilies. It later morphed into the fleur de lis in France, and then it just went
Mm,
from there. But it's all that the like I mentioned earlier, the double-headed eagle, the fleur de lis,
yeah.
the 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 template itself. It's all they all tie in with the tree of. It's like a tree of life within a tree of life. Um,
Yeah.
it just keeps going. There's the vesica piscis where they overlap on the grid. Uh, there's a
Mm,
lot of symbology like that. The Christian symbol of the fish, the vesica piscis, the womb, the opening to the womb, ancient art showing the same thing. Uh,
yeah.
it just get the rending of the veil in the temple when Jesus was crucified. The veil was said to have ripped down the
Yep.
center. There's a lot of, and uh, there's my representation of the template.
Oh wow.
Rosicrucians, it's Templar, Rosicrucians, and Masons. And if you look at each part of it, it's the square and the compasses. It's
Yeah.
just four of them in four different directions. Uh, it just keep there's that when I figured that I remember that dawned on me. I thought, well, what if I turn this into the cross? It looks a lot like the template, and
Yeah.
it kept blowing my mind. It still blows my mind when I think of it. Anyway, it's just there's so much to it. That was the back page of Gates of Light, Porte Lucius, written in 1516. The
Mm-hmm.
rabbi on the front cover. This was wasn't the back page. It was in the book, and I thought that looks. It's like he's carrying a holy grail,
Yeah.
some type
Yeah.
of grail, and I don't know what that means.
Yeah. That's weird.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of strange. It's like on the front of the book, he's got the traveling Jew is what a lot of people call it. He's pointing at the map that points to the New World, and then this guy's in there. It looks like a
Dude,
soldier carrying
dude,
a grail.
it's funny you say the traveling Jew because I ran across I was reading something recently, well, yesterday, and it was talking about the wandering Jew.
Yeah,
And I'd never heard this story. And I guess thinking back on like the passion, um, you know, step by step there, I guess there's this story. It's crazy. I kind of want to do a podcast on it, but I want to learn more about it. But there's this story that there was one of the times, Jesus is carrying the cross and he like stops to rest or falls down at some point, and some guy there is like mocking him and telling him to move it along, like hurry up, or something like that. And
yeah.
Jesus says to him,
Something like the earth will never accept your bones.
yeah, like you're gonna walk forever. Like
Yeah,
my time is short. I don't have that far to walk, but basically you're gonna walk until I come again. And so there's this. It reemerged real big in the Middle Ages again, like right after the Templars were milling around and digging stuff up in the Middle East. But this legend comes that there's this guy who's never died. He's this Jewish guy, and he just wanders. And there's even a
yeah,
story in that Cornelius Agrippa, that like magician dude from back
yeah.
in the day, he's got a story about running
He's
into him.
also part of Cornelius Agrippa was part of this story, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, I think, Da Vinci, there's a lot of people when I was tracing it back, well, I wanted to know who did this. Who the hell came up with all this stuff? Why,
Yeah.
who, all of that. I mean, there's a million questions. Why would they do this? What's the point other than, I mean, why would you find the new world or know about it? Why would you take all your treasures there and lay it out in a template? Okay, the template so you can find it again, but why in that
Right.
design? Why not all in one spot? Okay, don't put, what was that? Don't count all your eggs before they hatch, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's safer to spread it out. That makes sense, but why those dimensions? Why that design? Why? There's a lot of whys, and I think I don't know. There's a million different ways to explain it, but there's or to look at it. But I think they did it. Well, I wanted to find out who was behind it. That's where I was going with this. I
So I
catch myself
might.
down. So it was almost like doing a family tree, doing genealogy only for an organization, and it's harder to do that, especially when it's a secretive organizations. It wasn't just the Masons, Rosicrucians, and others like-minded organizations. But
Right.
I went back, from Jesse. Okay, I started at Jesse. Jesse was a Mason. Men around him were Masons. A lot of Quantrell's guerrillas. Then you go back from there. Jesse had met different people during the Civil War, like Albert Pike. The Quantrell's guerrillas had shared a camp at least once. I believe it was twice with Albert Pike. Albert Pike, famous,
Oh yeah.
everybody knows about Albert Pike and the 33rd degree and all that. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a million conspiracies about Albert Pike in that. But so Albert Pike, it goes back through Masons to some of the founding fathers, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and
Yep.
what blew my mind. I was looking at Masons, reading about Manly Palmer Hall, stumbled on the information about Marie Bauer Hall, her information about William, the Bruton Parish Vault. Um, so I thought, okay, that's interesting. That's on the back burner. I'm trying to find out who was behind this, and a lot of those founding fathers who were Masons,
Mm-hmm.
all where did they go to church often? At Bruton Parish Church, and
Bruton
they were all
Parish.
in and around Williamsburg, Virginia. So it's
Well, and then
like
I mean, literally, they have stained glass of
yeah,
um Nathaniel Bacon, the elder.
yeah,
Um, I wanted to ask you something real quick. So I did a
okay,
podcast with this guy who you should listen to it. He's really interesting. He's never written before, but he's in the process of writing a book called Shakespeare is Climate Change,
I've
which is
heard,
just
yeah, I saw that somewhere.
it
I've
probably
seen. You may
probably
have
on our
you
stuff.
told me
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
So I just pulled up. He sent me. He's 4 chapters in, and he sent me the first 4 chapters. Unshare your screen real quick, and I'm gonna
Okay.
share mine. He sent me the first 4 chapters, and he's got some images. And I don't know if you've looked into um, the Key of Solomon. Is this up? Do you see this right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so these are sigils within the Key of
Hmm.
Solomon, and it seemed interesting to me because I can kind of see. I remember when he was doing that. This one here in particular, I feel like you could probably overlay that template.
Yeah. I bet you. I'm definitely gonna
And
try.
so you're talking about where did all this come from? And about as far back as you can go
Yeah, well, and
are
that's what I was getting at. I mean, like Marie Bauer Hall mentioned Bruton Parish Church. Then,
right.
I know the Freemasons, going back through Freemasons who would have had any influence at all, who would have been more influential than a lot of the founding fathers. And then you go back from there, who started Freemason? Who is credited for starting Freemasonry? Sir Francis Bacon.
Francis
And I thought,
Bacon.
that's the guy. I remember when I came up to it, I thought, okay, it has to be him. It had, I went through Sir Christopher Wren and all these other people. I thought it has to be who, by the way, Christopher Wren also ties in very strongly the Wren building, with
Oh
Williams.
yeah.
So,
Not
and
only
then
that,
I got back. Go ahead.
Not only that, but they kind of poo poo and say that uh
People try to say he wasn't a Mason, but he was.
oh, he absolutely wasn't. His son
Yeah.
was the Grand Master of the lodge in London, where
Yeah.
it was where they like,
And they were members of the Christopher Wren was part of the Royal Society,
right,
which was
and that's
also founded by Sir Francis Bacon,
yeah,
along with
come
Masonry. Modern day Masonry is he's the guy who's credited with starting that. But a lot of his friends, I thought when I stumbled onto that, I thought this is the guy. I finally found my answer. He's the guy who started it all. And
but then you
and
got
I was
John D.
satisfied for about 3 days,
Yeah.
and then it started. I had these nagging questions like, well, who was his mentor? Sir John D.
Yeah.
John D. Who also ties in with that part of the country because of
Mhm.
the Newport Tower. He's credited with
Yeah.
starting colonies and the Newport Tower. Some people claim he was the guy who built it.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So then I thought, okay, what about John D? Who was his mentor? And you keep going back, and it's even if it wasn't their mentor, like so and so was good friends with so and so. And then it goes back to Da Vinci, Cornelius Agrippa, people like that. And you keep going back. And all these people they all had that one thing in common: mystic beliefs, alchemy, masonry,
Yeah.
Rosicrucianism, all the same line of thinking. And it goes back through Jewish rabbis as well. Well
Yeah.
known Jewish rabbis, some aren't so well known, but I went all the way back to Rashi, who was that was a nickname. I can't remember his full name, but anyway, Rashi was a famous Jewish rabbi and favored court guest of the Count of Champagne, one of the founding members of the Knights Templar. And
Right.
I thought that's who did it, and that's where they got it. Looked at the diagram for the Dome of the Rock; it matches the template. I thought this has to be it, and it
And
was.
where and
I'm
what's
satisfied.
interesting when I look at those seals of Solomon, um what's really interesting, again, I think we talked about this before, um, is that what were the so you go further back from the Templars. What is their knowledge? What were they looking for? Because I'm
Yeah,
convinced that they went over there to look for something, not that they were just over there being
digging around.
good Christians and then they
Yeah,
started digging around and
oh,
found something. I think they had knowledge and they went over there because hey, the Crusades are a good time because we haven't been able to get access to that area for a while. So they
yeah,
go over there. And what's interesting is, the Greater and Lesser Keys of Solomon, these grimoire books
yeah.
that is the connective tissue of all, basically all, like the
I
most common modern magic
yeah,
practices comes from the Key of Solomon. Now Solomon was this guy, God loved him, but then he had a period where he
yeah,
he went off the reservation for a while and supposedly was, created this whole magical system using like, Babylonian cuz
yeah,
he had a Canaanite wife, one
yeah.
of his 300 wives or whatever. And what's interesting is they can't find evidence of the Key of Solomon. They haven't been able to find evidence of the Key of Solomon, that book that like is the basis for all these modern magical practices, right? They can't
Yeah.
find evidence of it before the Middle Ages. It pops up in the Middle Ages. Well, what happened in the Middle Ages? The Templars happened in the Middle Ages. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
So
and
maybe something like that is what they found,
yeah,
and that kind of switched them over to this more esoteric worldview.
I think
And
it
then
did.
and then
They
after
had
they're
they had,
outlawed, their stuff gets passed around to all these other different orders, and then boom, right around that same time that their stuff is getting passed around and the cat's getting out of the bag, the the keys of Solomon show up. And then I really think the key of Solomon, and Solomon in particular, is I think the Crusades are the connective tissue between that old world knowledge that Solomon
Yeah.
had that probably was not supposed to be shared.
Now,
To be
according
honest with you.
to like Timothy Hogan, the current Grand Master for the Knights Templar,
Right.
uh, he he has said that, and it made a lot of sense to me. He said the Templar knew about a lot of this before they went over. The founding members, Hugh,
That's what I think. Yeah.
yeah, all of these guys, Hugh de Payne, the Count of Champagne, all these others, the founding members, 9 of them, who, and it doesn't make sense that only 9 guys would go over to protect all these pilgrims from all these
Hmm.
bad guys. That doesn't even make sense to me.
No,
Doesn't make sense to most people.
they
Uh,
were they were a cell. They were like guys who were using the situation over there because
yeah.
immediately they go over. They're not
Well, and he said they went in before the Crusades. They made like diplomatic journeys to speak
really,
to different people, the Sufis, the Druze, all these different,
really,
yeah, all these different mystic traditions in the Middle East. They each had like keys to things to deeper knowledge, special
yeah,
treasures, knowledge that you wouldn't want destroyed, etc. And according to Timothy Hogan, they went in, made these diplomatic journeys, missions, and they convinced most of the other groups in the Middle East to let them take care. They said, "Look, war's coming. You know what happens in war. If you don't want the Catholics getting it, let us take it and protect it.
yeah.
And we'll protect." And they must have been pretty trustworthy if that's the case for these
Well, and
people
I well
to
obviously,
win.
and they got this relationship with the assassin
Yeah,
while they were over there. So, I mean, in the middle of the Crusades, wartime, Christians versus Muslims, it no matter how it was over there, it seems pretty surprising that this elite military force tasked with protecting pilgrims during the Crusades in the Holy Land become buddy buddy with the gnarliest elite
yeah.
Muslim force. You know what I mean? So yeah, there must have been some sort of ties, either beforehand or um, something important enough for them to kind of
I mean,
commune
and you
together.
can, and like at the beginning of this, when you mentioned, why, how are 9 guys going to go out and protect all those pilgrims? You could bring that over here, like during the Old West when pioneers were moving to California. Did you just say 9? Did our government say, "Oh, 9 guys can handle it"? That doesn't even make sense. You've got all these
Right.
tribes, different groups, wanting to kill them for whatever reason, right or wrong. It took whole platoons. The army had to come
Yeah.
out and build forts and send out cavalry, constantly to help protect the pioneers. So I mean, if you liken that to the Templar, just 9 guys going into that huge part of the world, into the Middle East to protect pilgrims, it doesn't add up. And there
They
obviously was a lot deeper. There
yeah,
was a
they were
lot more
after
behind.
something. I
And
know
then,
I'm gonna
and then
have to look.
after they found it, what happened after they found it? They turned into one of the most powerful groups on earth.
Oh yeah, I mean with the support of the Pope, literally came
Yeah,
out, held a council, and said, "All right, these guys are made men. They don't
and they
answer to
only use their
anybody but
sword.
me and God.
Yep,
They don't pay taxes. They don't owe tribute to anybody. They don't have to listen to any king or monarch anywhere. They listen to me, and that's it. And that's that. I think that is one of the things, whether people like realize it or not. That dichotomy of them just becoming made men like that overnight, well, kind of overnight. It
yeah,
was pretty quickly. Um, it is what holds everybody's interest because it doesn't make any sense. It's not really mirrored anywhere else in history where just a handful of dudes end up becoming in like record time the most influential most important, richest corporation, like, overnight with the blessing
Yeah.
of the state and the church in a time when the church they were the most important, influential
Yeah.
corporation on the planet. And it's
It was
almost like they
almost
just
like
gave
they
it to them.
ceded. Yeah, it was like they ceded some of their power over to the Templar,
Yeah.
a large part of their power.
Yeah.
And that's just unheard of.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
makes you
And then
wonder.
they,
And to mention on top of that, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of it, like what you mentioned, the Seagulls of Solomon, Solomon's seal. I believe they found not just treasures, but it was a lot of really. Oh, God, I'd love to know everything they found. But anyway,
yeah.
I think it was a lot of esoteric and mystic knowledge and other. No, there's no telling what they found, but other items that gave them that power and wealth.
Yeah.
So, and then that carries down through the centuries to different groups. They split off after their fall in 1307. They've got other groups, and I'm sure they saw it coming before it happened. I mean, like when the Catholics, when the Catholics and the French raided their commanderies that
Yeah.
morning, there was no treasure. They expected storehouses full of all kinds of
Yeah.
wealth, and it was empty. And all those ships, I forgot how many ships it was in the
It's
port of La Rochelle. They were
18, I think.
yeah, they disappeared in the middle of the
Uh,
night. They were just vanished.
Gone. Where'd all
Yep.
those guys go?
I
Where'd all the
think
cargo
some went
go?
to Scotland. I think some went overland. Some
Yeah.
went by sea, and I think they spread their wealth out. I think the way when I view like the treasures here in the U.S., the templates, all of that, I always think of it as it's not it's a continuation of, in a way, like the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail. The
Yeah.
treasures that tie in with that moved over here too. I think they've,
Yeah.
and that was another thing I wanted to mention before I forget. The Tree of Life, the design, the way it's laid out. When I first saw it, I thought, why is it sideways? Why is it not up and down?
Right.
Thinking north, south, east, west. And then it dawned on me, and I don't know why I felt so stupid when I figured it out.
Yeah. East
East
west.
would be the top of the map.
Yeah.
In all the old maps, east was the top of the map, and
And
that's what the sun was.
which way is the lodge
Yeah,
position?
same way. Yeah,
Yeah.
The worshipful master sits in the east,
Yep.
and yeah, senior warden in the west. So,
Yep.
and the Tyler at the door on the western side.
Tyler's on the
Yeah.
western side.
So
Well, man, do you got anything you want to finish up with? We gotta go check on my little guy. He fell off his bike yesterday, and
oh
he's got a swollen wrist, so I gotta go.
I remember those days. That can't
Yeah,
doesn't feel good.
he can move it, so it's not broken, but
Tell him to soak it. Have him soak it in Epsom salt. That's what Mom always did for me. I don't know if it helped, but
that
she
was
said it did.
look. I got an Alabama granny, man. It was always Epsom salt.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
gunshot wound. I
what
don't know.
cracked me up, some of my grandmother, my late grandmother, she always said, yeah, the old timers, when if they got sick, they either drank whiskey or took laxative, and that cured everything.
It's
And if it
it's
was a
a
puncture wound, if it was a
it's a
puncture
reverse
wound,
enema or
yeah,
or a depressant. Well,
yeah.
I
Well, and
had
if they had a puncture wound, they'd soak it in kerosene. And I thought, my God, that had to burn like hell. But I guess it killed any
I had
fire.
an old great granny who could make warts disappear. No kidding.
I'll have to tell you about, yeah, my grandmother. My
Um,
grandmother did the same thing.
American Indian, you had to give her something,
Huh.
and then she'd like, yeah, you had to give her something. It was
If
like
you want, I'll
some
tell you what my grandmother told us, and it worked.
what's
And it's
that?
really weird. During the Great Depression, she lived in a tent with her family down in Austin. And
Yeah,
her dad would go to the rich neighborhoods and steal. Like after the milkman delivered the milk, he'd take half of what was delivered. He didn't take all. He'd take
yeah,
half, just enough to feed his kids and keep them with milk. So
yeah,
anyway, in the tent next to theirs at one time was an old gypsy woman. That's what my grandmother called her, an old gypsy
yeah,
lady. So the gypsy lady told her, if you have a wart, I guess somebody had a wart for that to come up. But anyway, she said, go to a place you've never been and never will return. Take a bone, rub it on the wart, and throw it over your left shoulder. Don't look back and never go back. And within a few days, the wart's gone. My brother did it when we were kids and it disappeared. It never came back. So
Dude,
I
there's
thought,
some
okay, maybe it's faith. I don't know. Maybe it's psychosomatic. Who knows? But it worked. So,
whatever it is, there's something to some of that old
yeah,
folk magic, man.
yeah,
Um, yeah. I'll tell you what, it's a little my mom's gonna hate me. She listens to every podcast, but when I was a kid, I had seasonal allergies and asthma, real bad. Cats and pine trees about to kill me. And I live in Virginia, amongst nothing but pine trees. So during the spring and summer, I was always wheezing, and I had an inhaler. And we didn't have a whole lot of money, and so going to the doctor a whole lot wasn't really a thing. So I had an inhaler, and when it ran out, I don't know if you remember the '90s, but in the '90s there were all these infomercials for like home remedy books. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like
yeah.
things you got around your house. Tons of them came out. Well, we never had the book, but on the commercial, it said something about try black coffee for an asthma attack, right? And it kind of works. It I don't know if it just opens up your airways because it's hot, or maybe the caffeine is kind of like the same effect as a steroid. It's enough to keep you from dying. Um,
Wow.
but it's not so. I mean, I had inhalers later on, but I went through long stretches where I'd wake
Black
up,
coffee.
couldn't breathe in the middle of the night. My mom, it started off as, let me brew you some coffee. And she'd, go downstairs 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would drink coffee and wheezing. And then it got to the point at some point in my life where I'd wake up and be like, Mom, I can't breathe. She'd be like, go make coffee. And then we went to an old school doctor, my pediatrician, when I was a kid. He was old school. And I remember her telling him about the coffee trick, and he was like, well, good deal. I don't like prescribing these things for kids anyway. Keep trying the
Yeah,
coffee. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna suffocate.
sounds good.
But
That's good to know.
yeah, it
If
does.
you're ever in a pinch, I mean,
It's
there's a lot of times where somebody might be in a pinch, and that's good to know.
yep, black coffee.
Yeah, there's one more. My
Cigarette smoke for an earache. You ever had that one? You ever had
earache.
an old southern auntie or a granny blow cigarette smoke in your ear?
I heard that one. I didn't hear that
Yeah.
one from my family. That was from a guy I used to work with when I was a machinist's apprentice.
Good for an earache, and I think it's the same thing. Nicotine is kind of the same effect as a
That makes
steroid.
sense.
It just soothes it for a while.
No,
But you
Indians.
look white trash as hell having some sitting on the front porch with your auntie, like, smoking a misty menthol and blowing it into your ear.
Yeah, they all smoked. Everybody in my
Oh
family,
yeah.
all the old my not my aunts, but my grandmother and all her sisters and brothers, they all smoked. It's just
Oh
that's
yeah.
what they did.
Oh dude, my
And I
dad
miss the smell. I miss the smell of coffee, bacon, eggs, and cigarette smoke.
cigarettes. My dad's truck, both windows up, smoking
Yeah.
Marlboro Reds. No wonder I had asthma.
That's funny. I still to this day I miss that smell. And like there's little places like up in when I've lived in northeast Texas for a couple of years. I was the director of tourism and economic development up there. I'd go around all over the place and meet people in those little diners that are kind of
Yeah,
out
yeah,
of the
they
way.
still yeah.
Yeah, you got some guy smoking. Nobody cares. Nobody
Oh yeah.
says a thing.
Yeah.
That just took me back. I loved that.
I
I
was a
would.
member. I was a member of the Moose Lodge for 1 year in Williamsburg, and that place. Good Lord, dude, you'll never get the nicotine out of the walls of that place, man. That smelled like 1971, like airport lounge. You know what I mean?
Wow,
Yeah.
wow, that's
Well,
funny.
man, it's been an awesome talk. Let me go
Yeah,
check on this little
thanks for
guy.
having me on.
Yeah, let's do it again. Let's start bouncing some ideas back and forth through email, and we'll just
Okay.
do another show every now and then. I'd love to have you back as a regular because we think on the same wavelength and it's tons of overlap. So, yeah,
Sounds
just
good. Yeah,
you,
just
you,
contact me anytime. I'm more than happy. I love this stuff.
yeah, me too. Well, thank you so much, Dan. Thank you to everybody listening. We just recently got a listener from Belgium. I don't know how to say thanks in Belgiumanium, but yeah, I don't think a Belgian. That was way too easy. I made it
Tonka?
ridiculous.
Is
But
it Tonka?
we got an Australian, a Canadian, and a Belgian, and I think somebody from Switzerland. So thank you guys, and thanks everybody else. We'll be back next week. Dan, the man, Duke. Um, I feel like we didn't even talk about Jesse James at all, but
Yeah,
pretty
we did. We talked a lot about that last time, but if
James
you want to talk
adjacent.
about it
Yeah.
anytime.
Yeah, we'll get back into some more stuff because I'm sure that there's individual rabbit holes that we could probably spend an hour on just certain parts.
Yeah.
So thanks again, guys. We'll be back on next week. I did get a message back from Court Lindahl, and he's getting over COVID, and he's still on board to try to do one of these with us. So that would be really cool. You'd love his stuff. Have you ever checked out Court Lindahl's stuff?
Not yet, but I will.
Cortlindahl. Court Lindahl. He's been on Oak Island before. All his research ties into these alignments, Axis Mundi, that are built in geomancy and all this kind of stuff, and everything from Mount Shasta to
Yeah,
Williamsburg. He's an archaeologist,
you
trained
just brought me up with
archaeologist,
one.
did archaeology in Williamsburg.
Wow,
But
that'd be fun.
he gets into, and he's done a ton of work into uh Marie Bauer Hall's.
Okay.
He's figured out an alternate theory, just as interesting, but using her research and like kind of refining it more and digging
Yeah,
into the families that are buried there and like the things written on. It's really cool stuff, and it's based in a little bit more of academia and less of the
yeah,
esoteric, but he still pulls a lot from what they were trying to say, and he thinks it has to do with the Beale treasure and Nathaniel Bacon and Bacon's rebellion. It's awesome stuff. So
well, what? And one last thing I'll say on that. I know
yeah,
you got to go, but when there's a lot of people who, my brother, for example, he'd say, "Oh, I don't get off. I don't get into that hoodoo stuff." And
yeah,
I said, you know what you're calling hoodoo were some of the founders of modern day science.
yeah,
So, I
yeah.
mean,
And here's the other
esoteric.
thing,
Yeah,
and you always hear it in the conspiracy world. World. It doesn't matter if you get into it. The people at the top,
that, and
they're
I've said
into
the
it.
exact. I have
And
said the exact same thing. I said it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. The people in power believe it, and that's
yeah,
what
they do.
makes it so.
And that's where they've steered everything
Yeah,
and imbued our entire country with that symbolism. So it's there, and you don't have to believe in it. You don't have to worship Mithras.
exactly.
But Bloomberg rebuilt a temple of Mithras in the basement of his building in the city of London. So,
Oh God, there's so many.
oh,
We could definitely go for several more hours on rabbit holes that come off of this that tie into it.
yeah.
It just keeps going. It's amazing. Einstein with Nicholas Roerich
Oh,
in the Masters
dude,
Building in New York City.
you
That
got to
stuff
listen
ties in
to.
with this stuff.
We just talked to me and Daniel talked to a physicist. Oh, I feel really bad. Daniel had a family engagement and couldn't make it again. He's being a real slacker lately, but he'll be back probably next week. But we had a guy named Hans Schantz. He's a physicist, an inventor, a physicist, and he came on and talked all about Einstein last week. So you got to check that one out. It's
Okay.
super interesting with the Rockefeller connection to the whole physics and the way the Rockefellers dumped
It
money
all
in.
makes it. it all
Hmm.
connect. Like I mentioned last time, it's like multiple spider layers of spider webs. You touch one thread, it ties in with all the others.
Yeah.
Like you said, Einstein. There's Nicholas Roerich, the Rockefellers. Rockefellers were friends with the Pinkerton, and who
Yep.
not Pinkerton, Butler, Silver Spoon's Butler, who was
Yep.
the Union general, who was part owner or board member of the bank in Northfield, Minnesota that the James gang robbed. And it
Yep.
just keeps it it's like you're caught in a vortex and they're all connected.
Yeah.
So
It's wild. All right, my
it's
brother. It
wild.
was great talking to you.
All
We'll
right,
be in
same
touch.
here.
Thank you,
Thanks for
brother.
having me on. Talk to you
All
later.
right. Thank you. Take care.
You too.